Now we'll talk about counting loops. These are loops where instead of having some condition that you keep looping while, you will have some sort of range of numbers that you count between, like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. So we can count from 1 to 10 with a while loop. However, if we happen to forget to increment our counter variable inside of the while loop, it can be very easy to get an infinite loop like this. So we're going to use a different kind of loop that is specifically built around counting and makes it much harder to give us an infinite loop. We could do counting up, counting down, counting by twos, dividing by halves. For loops. So the way for loops work are we have a counter variable that we specify, we tell it a start and an end, and we tell it a step amount, how much to increment each time or how much to decrement each time. Do we add 1 every time? 1, 2, 3, 4. Do we add 2? 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. Then again, we have some code inside of the loop, and that gets executed such amount of times. So we got the counter, the start, the end, and the step amount. In Python, it looks like this. This is the pseudocode down here. So with Python, we have for. That's the keyword. Then counter is our variable. It could be named anything. You might see it as X or as I, but here I'm just using counter because that makes it more clear. In range, and then you put the start value, the end value, except it doesn't go until it equals the end. It goes until it's less than, or while it is less than the end, and then step by 1. So the output here, it goes from 1 to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It does not include 11 because it stops once the counter equals 11. So just keep that in mind. So again, note that end, we want it to be 1 above the value we want to end at. The step is optional. We could just leave that part off, not have this comma here. If we don't have step defined, it will just step by 1 every time. So here are some examples. If we want to count up by 1, we could say for counter in range from 1 to 10, and then we print the counter on the inside. Now this is going to go from 1 to 9 because we put 10 as our ending. So if we wanted 1 to 10, this would have to be 11. Here's count down by 1. We have our counter for counter in range. We start at 10, we go until 1, but not including 1, and we go down by 1 each time. So we put -1 as the step to go subtract 1 each time. So we have 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. It doesn't equal 1. If we wanted that there, we'd have to make this 0 instead. Here's counting up by twos. So we have for counter in range, going from 1 to 11, not including 11. Step up by 2 each time. So then it goes 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. If we wanted 11 at the end, we'd have to put 12 here. Counting down, counter in range, 10 to 0, not including 0. Go down by 2 each time, so we put -2. So we get 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. So that's really all there is to the for loops, but let's have some time to practice converting a while loop with a counter into a for loop with a counter. So remember, our for loops have a counter variable, which we have here as well. It has a starting point, it has an ending point, and it has a step amount. So how do you identify these? What is the starting value? That's specified here with the while loop. What is the ending value? This is right here. And then what is the step? Well, in the while loop, we have to manually put that in there. This is why it's easy to forget this step and have an infinite loop. And my for loops are much better. So go ahead and try to write a for loop that will do the same thing. And I'll show you my solution in a moment. So here's the same thing. For counter in range from 1 to 11, print the counter. So we have fewer lines of code. We don't need this initializer up here. We don't need to do this up here. We turn 4 lines of code into 2. Okay, here's another one. Counter starts at 2, and we're going into include 100. So print the counter and then increment by 2 each time. How do we write this as a for loop? Well, in this case, notice that we say counter is less than or equal to 100 in the while loop, and we want it to equal 100 at the end. So here we have for counter in range from 2 to 101, because we want it to be anything less than 101, and step by 2. Okay, here is counter starting at 10. While counter is greater than 0, print the counter, decrement the counter by 1. So go ahead and write a for loop for that. And here's the solution. For counter in range 10 to 0, going down by 1 each time, so a -1 here, print the counter.